Hello everyone. In this video we will try and understand the next important condition of loops, that is the while loops. Now, coming to the most basic question, what are loops? Loops are nothing but a set of instructions to repeat a certain piece of code or block of code. So only if our condition is matching or if the condition is true, only then the particular set of code is run. Now, coming to the next question, what are while loops? A while loop is used to iterate over a block of code as long as the set condition is true. So only if the condition is true, then this particular and condition is matched and only then the block of code is entered. So if we try to understand this in a more simple manner, it means that first the condition is checked and then the body of the loop is entered only if the condition is true. If it is false, then automatically we come out of the while loop. And once this particular condition is true and it has run the block of code, it again goes back after one iteration. The condition is again checked, and this process continues till this condition evaluates to false, after which our while loop terminates. So let's look at the particular flow diagram and try to understand what exactly is happening. So the first thing that we need to understand is inside this while loop, this condition is checked, and only if the condition is true, this particular code block is executed. And as soon as the code block is executed, it goes back to the initial level of the while loop and the condition is checked again. This goes on and on till this particular while condition becomes false. And as soon as the condition becomes false, we have to terminate the while loop. What is happening? So let's say I define a variable a and I give a value of 5 to it. Okay, now let's actually create 5 factorial using a while loop. By 5 factorial I mean factorial is nothing but a multiple continued till you reach the value 1. So 5 factorial would simply mean 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1, that is 120. So for creating a factorial using a while loop, the first thing that I would pass here is a dummy variable called, let's say, my_mul, and I give the value as 1. Similarly, initially I am giving the value of I as 1. So these are two variables that we are going to use to create the factorial. Now, in the while condition, I'll simply mention while I is less than or equal to a. Only if the value of I is less than or equal to a, then the particular set of code should be executed. And inside the code block, I am going to mention my_mul is equal to my_mul multiplied with I. Okay. And the most important step that you have to mention here is you have to increase the value of I. Only if you increase the value of I, this while condition at some point of time will become false. Otherwise, what would happen is you would have an infinite loop running, which is going to take up a lot of time without giving us any kind of good results. So here we'll say I is equal to I plus 1. So I'm incrementing I by 1 every time this particular code is run. Okay. So once this is done, now I'm coming out of the while loop and I'm going to print. So let's say we can give a statement like the final number is, and inside this let's give my month. Okay, and let's make it a F string so that my month can automatically be picked up inside this particular string. Now if we run this, you would see Python has come up with this number as 120. So let us understand what exactly has happened here. So we started off with my mul value as 1 and I is equal to 1. Then what Python does is it's executing this line number 4. It checks in the while loop if I is less than or equal to 5 because a value of a is 5. So while 1 is less than or equal to 5, so this statement becomes true. So it enters the loop and what it does is it multiplies my mul with I. Okay, now since the values are 1 each, so we get the final value here as 1. As soon as this particular statement is executed, we are incrementing the value of I by 1. So for the next cycle, what happens is, the next iteration, this 1 will become 2 because we have incremented by 1. Similarly, it again starts checking if 2 is less than or equal to 5. Again, this condition is true. So it is going to multiply here my mul, which is having the value of 1 now, is multiplied by 2, and my mul's final value has become 2. And again we incremented by 1. Then I becomes 3. So like that it multiplies 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Once the value of I becomes 5, then what happens is in this while loop we have 5 less than equal to 5. This is also true. The final value of my mul becomes 120 and now I becomes 5 plus 1, that is 6. And when I become 6, this condition does not hold true anymore. And hence we come out of the loop. And this particular statement is printed. So print the final number is, in the last iteration we will have 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1, that is 5 factorial. So the final number is 120. Okay. Now, we can also include a while loop along with the else statement. So let's say see a simple example of how we can actually include these kind of elements. So let's say I have a variable called b and I give the value as 10. Similarly, let's start off the value of I as 5. Okay. Now, here again we write while, and let's say we simply say this term while I is less than b. So only if this condition satisfies, we are going to do certain thing. But inside this code block itself, I'm going to write an if, elif, or and else statements. So the first statement I would mention is if I is less than b, the same condition. Then we would simply say print. This time, let's print out the statement. We are inside the while loop. Okay. And as soon as this statement is printed, we are going to increment I by 1. So I is equal to I plus 1. This is happening only if we are inside this particular if condition, which is inside this while loop. Now, what happens when the value of I becomes 11? So I'll simply mention elif, and here I'll only check this condition if I is 11. If it becomes 11, then let's print out the simple statement. We are inside the elif loop. Okay. Now, once the elif is also done, the final thing that I would mention is we were having a while loop along with else. So we'll simply mention else. This else is with respect to while. Okay, if and elif were inside the while loop. Now, this else here will simply print, let's say we are inside the else condition. Okay, now when we run this, let's see what happens. So we started off the value of I as 5 and B as 10. So while 5 less than 10, this particular condition is printed. That is print, we are inside the while loop. And if you count the number of times it is printing that, it is 5. Okay. So this got printed out 5 times. But as soon as the value of I became 11, it prints out this particular statement, we are inside the else condition. Okay, because this particular piece, even though we have written an elif condition here, but this was inside the while loop, and as soon as I became 11, this condition will not hold true, so it has to not enter the block. So nothing inside the block is entered, and it came directly to the else statement where we have simply printed we are inside the else condition. So that is the reason, if you are wondering as to why we did not get this printed out, this is for the simple fact that when I became 11, this particular while condition did not hold true. So 11 less than 10 is false. So this entire chunk or the block of code was not executed, and it directly went ahead and printed out the else condition where we have mentioned this. Hence you would see this particular line being printed 5 times, and after that directly we are inside the else condition is printed out. Okay. Now, the next thing that we will understand is the final part, that is the dangers associated with the while loop. Although, like some of you might wonder that for loop and while loop, both of them look and function almost in the same manner. But while loop has its own dangers. The first and the foremost danger is that if you're not careful with the conditions, the while loop can become an infinite loop. That is, if while writing this, let's say if we have forgotten this particular statement. So let me comment it out and let me show you exactly what I mean by the danger. Okay, so I've commented I is equal to I plus 1 here. That means no matter how many times this loop is run, the value of I will always be 5 and B will always be 10. So if I commented this out and let's say I run this condition, you would see that this star mark indicates that this is still running, and here it goes on running and printing out we are inside the while loop, and this becomes an infinite loop. So no matter how many times this is printed out, you'd always see that this particular thing will keep repeating itself. So this is one of the biggest dangers that can happen. So if you're not careful, now that we know that we have removed this, so we can immediately make those corrections out here. Let me run this again, and I've edited it out. But if you are not careful and you have missed it out, then it can actually go on running forever. Okay, so these are the major dangers that you would find that happens in a while loop, and this concludes the session. This is what I have for you guys in this video. Thank you.